Okay? I can tell. That was awesome. It kind of threw me off. I'm not prepared, but it's okay. We're the only ones here, right? Let's have our quote in scriptures before we start, before Torah study. Great. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kitzanu b'vitzatah v'tzivanu la'asak b'derei Torah. Please, Yehovah, make the Torah's words sweet in my mouth and in the mouth of all your people, the house of Israel. May we, your children, all of Israel, know your name and the name of your Messiah, Yeshua. And may we study your Torah simply because it is good. Blessed are you, Yehovah, who gave us the Torah of truth. Hallelujah. Let's remain standing while we do the scriptures for today's Torah portion. First one, Deuteronomy 11, 26 through 28. Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, and a curse if you will not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside from the way which I command you this day to go after other gods which you have not known.
את חברך אשר תשמע all המצוות אדוני אלוהיכם אנוכי מצוותכם היום. וחיילם את תשמע אל מצוות אדוני אלוהיכם וסרתם מחדש איך אשר אנוכי מצוות אתכם היום ללכת אחרי אלוהים אחרים אשר לא ידעתם.
And the half Torah, Isaiah 54:11 through 13. O you afflicted, tossed with tempest and not comforted, behold, I will lay your stones with fair colors and lay your foundations with sapphires. And I will make your windows of rubies and your gates of beryl and all your borders of precious stones. And all your children shall be taught of the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children.
שמחותייך אושרייך אלנה אחד בכהנו לך לענה חפץ וחוקל בנייך אל מועד אדוני ורם שלום בנייך.
And from the New Covenant, John 16:1 through 3. These things I have spoken to you so that you wouldn't be caused to stumble. They will put you out of the synagogues. Yes, the time comes that whoever kills you will think that he offers service to God. They will do these things because they have not known the Father nor me.
אתלה דיברתם אליכם אל מען עדותו שלו וימנדו אתכם מתוך הקהל ואף כי גאים חזמה אשר כל הוגר אתכם החשוב בלבו כרובן הוא מריב לי אדוני ואתלה יעשו לכם כי אמין אבי ואקדם אותי לא ידעו.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and set everlasting life in our midst. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, giver of the Torah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natu anah teret emet v'chayam nata b'tachanu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. Today's portion is read, and it means see. And if you have the complete Jewish Bible, when you go to Deuteronomy 11:26, you'll see it starts off in verse 26 with see. I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. And most of the other scriptures, what you'll see is behold, or some other word, but the word is see. Now, why would you translate that in any other way other than see? I don't know. I don't know how they picked the words that they picked in the English translations, but that's why I like to study Hebrew, so that you know exactly what the scriptures are saying. Now, that's another whole sermon all in its own, and I really do not want to get into that. Trust me, I don't. This is a great Torah portion. You would think, because the book of Deuteronomy is a reiteration of what was already stated in the book of Exodus, and sometimes it gives you more detail, and sometimes not as much detail. But there, as you know, in the Torah portion, there's 7 readings, and the first reading was on blessing and curse. The second was not to offer sacrifices in just any place. The third reading is warned against being lured into the ways of the residents of the land. The fourth reading is regarding kosher. The fifth reading is regarding tithe. Sixth reading is about the Shemitah year. The seventh reading is about the firstborn and your brother being enslaved. So now, as I'm reading through this during the week, now I like to read the Torah portions, but I don't read them all the time. I don't read them every Torah. Sometimes it's enough just to hear Pastor Jeff teach on it, which to me is just awesome. I've never seen the scriptures this way. You remember when David and Rivka Costello was here, the Jewish couple from New York, and he said that the rabbi men, not just the rabbis, but the Jewish men, the Orthodox, will study from early morning till sometimes 2 and 3 o'clock the next morning. Go home for lunch, go home for dinner, and continue to study. And my thought was, I just don't see how you can do that much studying. But if you really wanted to know the Torah, I can understand from doing this Torah portion, it would take that much time. There's enough in there. In fact, there's so much in there from each verse, it's impossible to grasp just in casual reading of the Bible. It's impossible. And the Torah is so full of nuggets, and the deeper you read, the more comes out, and that's what I discovered. Now, I have a lot here, way more than I can cover in this few minutes we have together, but I'd rather have more than not enough. So I hope I can get through some of it, because the ending is really good, and I hope I get to it. You'll enjoy it too. But he starts off with a blessing and a curse. Now, oh my goodness, we know all about the teaching on the blessings and the curse. Fortunately, he just mentions it here, and then in chapter 27 and 28, he's going to give you the details. Everybody's familiar with Deuteronomy chapter 28 because of the blessings, right? And we love the blessings. And in fact, Christian, I don't know how to say it. Anyway, the Christian, I still don't know how to say it. I'll get it out in a minute. Christianity has made a doctrine on blessing. I got it out. A doctrine on blessing. I mean, that's what you're going to hear. If you turn on any TV not this morning, but tomorrow morning, and you listen to any service, it's going to be on the blessings and how to get them. Correct? You know it's true. I was devastated by a article that was put out on the vast wealth of the evangelists that we all know of and we used to listen to and admire and love. And I won't mention any names, but one of the ones I thought was pure and just so right on with God, he's worth over $8 million. And his son is worth $42 million, who took over the ministry. $42 million. Now, their goal, their state is to feed the poor. Well, he's got the poorest family I've ever heard of, that he had to accumulate $42 million to feed them. Oh my goodness, that's a huge family. And then some of them are up into the hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm talking about TV evangelists who preach that if you'll send in $1,000, you'll be extremely blessed. Now, this is just crazy. Do you see Jesus? I'm sorry, do you see Yeshua teaching a message like that? Who never carried a penny with him? He didn't need to. When he needed to pay taxes, not that he needed to pay it, but because they wanted him to pay it, he just told Peter to go fishing. You know, his needs were always met. Never needed to worry about anything. When people were hungry, what did he do? Multiplied 2 fish into enough to feed 5,000, took 5 loaves of bread, enough to feed 5,000, and had plenty left over. Well, anyway, my point being, he didn't carry millions of dollars around with him. His ministry wasn't about, well, if you don't give, I'm going to have to go. If you don't give, this ministry is out of business. And yet they are worth millions. It's mind-boggling. And it's because they take a few verses on blessings and made a doctrine out of it. Now, blessings are in the scriptures, no question about it. In fact, it's used, the word blessed, and blessing is used 503 times in 474 verses. So, that's a lot. But sin is used 774 times in 710 verses. So, it's not talked about as much. Now, those two are way up there. I'll give you some more statistics. Well, for example, hell is only mentioned 32 times, but heaven is mentioned 531 times. So, but why would you take just one word? I know why, because it feels good, and people like it. But give you just a little example of the scripture. Then this really helped me when I read this. But God created man, Adam and Eve, and why did he do it? Obviously, he wanted fellowship, because once they were created, Yah came down and had fellowship with them in the evening, right? And obviously that's what he wanted. And then when Eve was deceived by the serpent, that's another sermon too. But when Eve got deceived and they disobeyed God, let's just put it that way. They disobeyed Yah, and they covered themselves, and the first thing that happened was they broke off the fellowship with Yah. They did it because Yah came down still seeking to have fellowship, and they were hiding. And you know the story. Then Yah sends them out of the garden, and a whole series of things start, and man becomes wicked. And as a matter of fact, in Genesis 6:5, so in only 6 chapters, went from creating man and having fellowship in chapter 3, and in 3 chapters later, here's what Yah has to say. Then Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. That's such a sad verse. And Yahweh was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. Now that's awful. So what Yahweh does, and you know the story, he decides to destroy the earth, to erase mankind off of it. However, there was one man, Noah, who found grace in God's sight because, well, for one thing, he was still pure. His blood had not been contaminated by the Nephilim and by that problem, another sermon. But he was pure, and he found grace, and he was a righteous man. And this time, God decides to use Noah to raise up another generation, another group of people, and then he centers in on one man out of all this. Now, by chapter 12, we've got another man who's come along. His name is Abram at the time. And God, instead of trying to work through the entire world like he had when he created Adam and Eve and then the people, but because of the fall and because their hearts were evil continually and the bloodline got contaminated, he couldn't work through them any longer. He destroys them. And this time he's going to work through a man who eventually becomes a people, and he wants to work through this one group of people. Now, we know who that is. That's Israel, okay? Now, we have got to understand that this entire book is written to Israel, okay? And we have to be in association with Israel. We have to be part of Israel to receive what all that Yah has for us, all of it. Now, I know you haven't been taught that. You are here. You certainly are taught that here, but you weren't taught that for years. I wasn't. I was taught that even trying to work through Israel didn't work, so he comes up with another organization called Christians and Christianity. Well, that's just not true. That is also going off in the wrong direction. We'll get into that later. So in Genesis 12:2, Yah says to Abraham, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. There's other verses that say, and everyone in the world will be blessed because of him. Israel was not only to receive from Yah how we were supposed to live on this earth, but to show the world who Yah was. Now, there's been a lot of issues and a lot of problems, but that's still, that has never been taken away. That's still our objective. Israel is to show the world how to relate to Yah. Okay? Now, when we come to the scriptures here, and starting in this blessing, this Torah portion in Deuteronomy 11, verse 26, when it says, see, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you will listen to the mitzvah of Yehovah, your God, that I am giving you today, and the curse if you don't listen to the mitzvah of Yehovah, your God, but turn aside from the way I am ordering you today and follow other gods that you have not known, if you do that. Now, he's talking to Israel. He is not talking to the world, okay? And all through this, remember, everything I'm saying, this is to Israel. Now, we are part of Israel, right? Shake your head like this. We are. We are associated with Israel. We are Israel. I'm as much associated with Israel as Paul the Apostle was. Can you receive that? And so are you, if you have embraced this. We are once. Now, I know he made provision. Yah made provision for the Gentiles, which I used to be. I'm no longer a Gentile. I was a Gentile, now I'm not, because I have become attached to Israel. I am one with Israel, and I worship the Holy Father and the Messiah as though I was right here in the Old Testament, as though I was out in the wilderness, as though I went through and came into the Promised Land. I am in the Promised Land. And Yeshua made all this really come together, but nevertheless, the Tanakh, the Torah, is for us as much today as it was back then. Okay? A lot of things in the New Testament explains what the Old Testament is about, but it's certainly not a new teaching. Nothing in the so-called New Testament is new, except the Messiah came. The Messiah did indeed come. Now, you know this is true. You know this is for Israel because the world is not part of the kingdom of God. The world isn't. Now, there's scriptures all through it that teach you that. You know 1 John 2:15. Do not love the world, neither the things that are in the world. For the love of the world is against the Father. I know I'm not reading that right, but y'all are reading it. And anyone that loves the world does not love the Father and can't be a part of it. Now, that's strong. That's really strong, and it's going to get a little stronger here in a minute. In Deuteronomy 11:29, when Yehovah your God brings you into the land you are entering in order to take possession of it, you are to put the blessings on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal, well, that is what happens in Deuteronomy 28. For verse 31, for you are to cross the Jordan to enter and take possession of the land Yahweh your God has given you, and you are to own it and live in it, and you are to take care to follow all the laws and rulings I am setting before you today. That was my point. Here are the rulings in verses 1 through 12, chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Here are the laws and rulings you are to observe and obey in the land Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, has given you to possess as long as you live on earth. And here it is. You must destroy all the places where the nations you are dispossessing serve their gods, whether on high mountains or on hills or under some leafy tree. Break down their altars, smash their standing stones to pieces, burn up their sacred poles completely, and cut down the carved images of their gods. Exterminate their name from that place. This is called Avodah Zarah, worshiping false gods. Avodah Zarah. Now we got to. All right. First of all, you say, well, we don't have false gods in our country today. We don't do false gods. Oh, really? All right. I'm going to show you some. But just keep in mind, Avodah Zarah. Do not love the world, neither the things that are in the world. Okay, I want to tell you something. When I love C.S. Lewis and the story, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Anybody's ever seen it or read it, you know it's a great story. Well, there's a line in that story. My favorite line in that story is when, I think it's Edmund, the young man, is talking to the beaver. And Beaver is describing him, Ashland. And Ashland, you know, is a type of the Messiah. And as the beaver describes him, Edmund goes, this Ashland sounds ferocious. Is he safe? And the beaver said, goodness gracious, no, he's not safe, but he's good. And I want you to know that Yah is not safe, but he is good. And the reason I'm telling you that is because it's not something to play around with. This is going to get really tough here in a few minutes. It already got a little tough when he told them to go into the land. They were to destroy, annihilate, do away with, okay? And it says, do not love the world or the things in the world, because if you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you, okay? So you can't have joined yourself to Yah, or at least think you joined yourself to Yah, and still play with the world. I'll give you a quick example. I met this man in Richmond, and he had just come out of jail for about I don't remember, the third or fourth time for using cocaine. He wasn't a seller or a drug dealer, but he definitely was a user, and he kept getting in trouble by being at the wrong place at the wrong time, because he bought it a lot, and he would be involved with people who were selling, and they'd get busted. Well, he'd have to go along. Although he wasn't a dealer, he still got jail time, and this was the third or fourth time. So he came to a meeting that I was at the church I was going to, and he was introduced to us, and we talked, and I told him, I said, well, you must enjoy jail. You must like it, because you keep doing it. He said, no, I want to quit. I really mean it. And so he came over to the house, and I think even that week, and sure enough, he gave his heart to the Lord. That's what he said. And guess what I told him? That little story. I said, this isn't safe. I said, you've really done something now, because you're going to ask God to help you, and guess what? He's going to help you. And it may not be the way you meant for it to be, but you can walk away from your life, from the drug addiction. You can walk away from it, and you'll be fine. But if you play around, you're going to get in trouble. And don't you know, he did pretty good for a while. I'm talking like, I think even months. And he took a new job, and he was working and doing very well. And then that devil got a hold of him, and he stole some money. And this time he got 8 years in prison. See, he had only been getting 2 and 3 months, and his parents were always bailing him out and stuff like that. And I didn't get to see him any of those 8 years, but I often bring that up, that, see, when he was on his own, okay, he wasn't asking God for any favors, and God wasn't giving him any. But once you bring the Lord into the situation, he's going to help you. And that 8 years did him a world of good, because I saw him after the 8 years. And he had become a jailhouse minister. I know that's kind of derogatory, but nevertheless, he was. He had really turned on to the Lord, and for 8 years, he was doing great the whole time he was in prison. He came out, and he still struggles. The drugs are still struggling. He's not in trouble. He still wants to be a minister, but it's still got a hold on him. And I haven't seen him now for years. But I do know one thing, that Yah's for him. And Yah wants to see him live clean and have victory in his life. I know he does. But if he doesn't, Yah put him back to where he will have victory. And I'll tell you that this is true for you and I, because the worst thing you can do is bring God into your situation and beg him for help and then ignore the help. And sometimes he'll make the help so that it's impossible to ignore. I've said about another person I knew who has called on the Lord, and who truly has good knowledge of the Lord, but has addictions and things he can't shake off. And I said, well, if he's really asking Yah for help, he's going to get that help. And I expect it's going to come through a long prison term, or he's going to be flat on his back for whatever reason. But Yah will help you. Now, that's awesome. But don't play around with it. There's nothing to play around with. Yah takes this stuff very seriously. Now, I got to move on. After I read that part there, you're to annihilate it, but then it says, but you are not to treat Yahuwah your God this way. That's for them, but it's not for Yah. I know you've seen this, that whenever you see the word God spelled out, it'll be G-D. Have you ever wondered about that? The reason for that is this right here. Break down their altars, smash their standing stones to pieces, burn up their sacred poles completely, and cut down the carved images of their gods. Exterminate their name from that place. There was not to be even a remembrance of them. Get rid of that name. But don't do that to Yahuwah. And so the Jewish people had understood that, and they, if you write Yahuwah's name on a piece of paper, you can never destroy that piece of paper. If you do, you just did to God what he asked you not to do. So that's why they don't call him Yahuwah. They call him Adonai, because they don't want it printed. And you go online and you see little I saw it this morning, little footnotes that say this is sacred pages. Don't print these out. And if you do print them out, treat them carefully. When the Torah, when Israel, or right now, even in Israel, when they use up a Torah, when they roll it out and it gets so torn and old and broken up that it can no longer be used, they have a special burial for these. They go into a certain place, and they're there for years and years and years, and eventually they'll be buried. That's how sacred it is. And that's why if you don't write Yahuwah on a piece of paper, if you don't write God, if you just put G-D, then you're okay. You didn't write the name down. And there's no danger of destroying his name. His name's crucial. Now, they take it a little bit too far, because how are you going to call on the name if you don't even know it and you can't say it? You got to. In Psalms 91, it says, he'll protect you because you know my name. Well, if you call him Adonai, that's not his name, okay? Don't pray to Adonai, because we don't know who that might be. That's a substitute name. It's a made-up name, actually. just simply made up. Jehovah is his name, and you should know it and use it. At the same time, I love the fact that they respect it so deeply. I do, even though I don't want to go that far. Now, idolatry was a big problem in Israel. You know it was. It was so bad. I mean, this is almost inconceivable. It's so bad that over a period of years, Yah finally let Israel be completely destroyed. The temple burned down, and it was all because of idolatry. I mean, the very people that he had said, I'm going to raise up, I'm going to show you to the world, it was just too bad he destroyed it. Now, I don't have time to go greatly into detail, but there's a book called The Apocalypse of Abraham. It's called pseudepigrapha. It's not in the Bible, but it certainly could be. And it's Abraham's early years when he lived with Terah. And Terah, his father, was an idol worshiper. Not only was he an idol worshiper, he made idols and sold them. And Abraham, as a young person, had to help him. And the stories go that Abraham would tell his father, after seeing incidences of these idols, such as one, he had to help his dad. One had fallen over. That's right. One had fallen over. And so Terah said, Abraham, come and help me pick him up. So when they picked him up, the head broke off. So he took the head, Terah took the head and put it on another body, and everything was fine. And so Abraham said, you shouldn't worship these as idols. They should be worshiping you. You're the one that created them and move them around and take care of them. And Terah got extremely furious and upset. Well, anyway, it went on. I'm going to skip the details. God told Abraham to leave. And when he left, God destroyed Terah and Lot's dad, because they were all in that place making those temples, and they killed them. He killed them for making those idols. But Abraham, all through this section, Abraham is going, who created me? Who is the true God? It's certainly none of these idols, and he'd name them and make jokes of them. And that is what it goes on to say. When you destroy that name, they give the name of the place that they destroyed a derogatory name. The Jews still do that to this day. And so Abraham was doing that, giving them derogatory names. But because of Abraham's insistence on who is God, who is this God, the Creator, Yah reveals himself to him. And now you can get the rest of the story from Genesis 12 through 24 and see how Abraham was the great man of God and how Yah used him in so many places, and he is the Father. Now, idolatry is all through the Scriptures. You see it when in Egypt, the 10 plagues, each one was aimed at one of their idols, one of their false gods, such as frogs. There was a group that worshiped frogs. So God said, oh, you like frogs? Okay. And he sends them into about millions into their beds. And so you know the 10 plagues, every one of them. And even to the 10th one, when the destruction of the firstborn, even that was a religion where they worshiped the firstborns of everything. God showed that he is the only true God. I mean, these aren't gods at all. As the Scriptures say, there aren't gods at all. They're nothing but man's imagination. There's nothing there. So it's pretty simple for God to show himself strong. Understand what I'm saying? Because he is real, and all of these were just false as they could be. Nothing to them. And then Elijah dealing with Baal. 850 prophets of Baal against Elijah. And yet Elijah stood, and God showed himself strong for who? For Elijah. Certainly not for the prophets of Baal. The second commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. There are no other gods before me. But don't create one and use it as a god. And then, as I said a little bit ago, that God used Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar to destroy Israel, burned the temple down, scattered them, brought millions of them to Babylon, and they lived, and except for the little sections like Meshach and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Shake the bed, make the bed, Abednego. That's why I remember them. There was groups that held on to their Jewishness and held on, and in Babylon, a lot happened. Another sermon. But when they came back from Babylon, notice that there's no more idols. Now, I used to think that they got cured. They were cured of idol worship by getting sent to Babylon. But I learned that, well, not exactly. What they did was they created a new goddess, another Avodozara, and it's still alive and functioning today, and it's a temptation to everybody sitting in here, and the world is just full of it. And because of time, I just have to go right on into it. In the 3rd century, the king of Lydia, Croesus, that's the best I can say his name. You will have heard of him as Midas. But Midas in the Greek is mythology, but there truly was a man named Midas, or at least his name was Croesus, but they called him Midas. And you know what he did? Some people said 600 BC, others said 3rd century. So sometime around in there, he invented money. See, up until that time, a merchant could make his own coins and could declare the value of them. And some days you made out, and some days you got robbed, because they could make them bigger or smaller. Anyway, it was all individually controlled, and most of it was bartering anyway, right? But this man Midas, this king Midas, decided if he could make his own coin and everybody used it and he declared its value and guaranteed it, then everything would be fair. In other words, if something cost, who knows what they call it back then, but if something cost $1, it was $1 for everybody, not some bigger, some smaller. You get it? And they invented money. And from that time until right now today, money has become the idol of this world. Let me read you this statement. Money replaced the gods using much the same strategy Yahweh had tried to use when he rescued Israel from Egypt, though on a smaller scale, acts of power. Unlike other gods or goddesses, money had some real power, some real presence. Unlike Baal, money answered her prophets. Pray to Baal for a new camel or a new wife or a good harvest, and you just never knew what might happen. But it was usually disappointing. But money would deliver every time. The guy who had money could have anything he wanted. Money saw to it. You could look around anywhere and see the evidence of her power. People who served money well lived in comfort and luxury and enjoyed the best. And people who did not serve money well might be left to die in a gutter with nothing to their name. And money was much more powerful than mere wealth. Wealth was too obvious. It was just the stuff you worked for and acquired. But money was subtle, like the serpent of old. Money was an invisible power that could control men's mind from a distance, an abstraction who could be present in all places at once, like God himself. Let that sink in for a minute. And money is the idol of today. Now, people give their lives for money. Amen? They do. And they will take lives for money. I wouldn't want to mention any names, but that woman that ran against President Trump and her husband, not mention any names, but they'll kill for money, and they'll do anything for money. For the sake of time, I have to ask you, has money become your idol? You can tell very easily if it's what gets you up every morning. If it's what gets you up every morning, it's probably an idol to you. if it dictates where you live. Now you say, oh, no, it would never do that to me. Oh, yeah, I've met many people who moved to a different city because their job said, I'll give you a raise if you'll move here. Money has dictated to them where to live. And I've always noticed, well, they got good schools and they've got, we get a real nice house, and I don't hear anything about where's the synagogue. Oh, well, I don't think they have one. It doesn't matter because money's their God, and that's who they worship anyway. And as long as the money's flowing, they're happy. Amen? You see it. If it determines how you feel about yourself, if money determines how you feel about yourself, then money is your idol. And I know you know it too, that sometimes you don't have a dime in your pocket and you feel low, you feel really bad. Why is that? Yeshua never had a dime in his pocket, and I bet you he didn't feel bad anytime. And if you have $100 in your pocket and you feel great, you got an idol. You got an idol in your pocket. Let me see if I got $1. I do. You ever looked at this thing? There's idols all over it. The number 13 runs rampant over this thing. There's 13 arrows in that eagle's foot. There's, I forget all the different places. There's an all-seeing eye, the eye of providence. Who is that? Who is that? You don't know. Well, is it Jehovah? In God we trust. Really? In God we trust. If we give enough, we'll get a bunch of these back. That's the lesson. You know it is. That's what you hear. If you'll give enough of these away, you'll get enough back that you'll have more than enough. And what does it say under that pyramid? It's in Latin, and I don't know Latin at all. But it means New World Order. Yah says to destroy idols, put away idolatry. You must love Jehovah more than anything else. So we've got, how are you going to do that? Just real quick. If money has any grip in your life, the only way to beat it down is to let Jehovah get a larger grip. And how are you going to do that? Just what you're doing. When we come to synagogue and we study Torah and we study the Word and we pray to Yahweh and I ask Him to help us. You know, I know you need to live in a home. You really should. You should eat 3 times a day. I mean, those are givens, okay? It's kind of like the man I saw on TV who had a food addiction, and he had lost down to, when he started, he was like 400 pounds. He had lost down to where he was skinny. I thought he looked underweight. And but he was on a TV show, and they were really applauding him and telling him how wonderful he was, that he had lost all this weight, and he felt so good. So guess what he did to celebrate? He went to McDonald's, and within a couple of years, he was back to 400 pounds. And he said, this is the hardest thing. He says, because I have a food addiction, and with the food addiction, you have to eat. You're around it all the time. You have to eat. But he said you wouldn't ask a heroin addict to just cut down on his heroin to get away from it, or an alcoholic to just don't drink so much, right? That doesn't work. But with food addiction, you can't stop eating. Well, this is what I'm saying here. Here's the hard part with money. You need some. If this was a bartering country, we possibly could do away with it, but that's not going to happen. So you've got to let Yah be so dominant in your life that everything else pales. I can't say it any other way. And then be doing those things that help you in that area, not in the other area. You understand? Shake your head like this. I know you're with me. Okay. Do not add to or subtract from it. That's in Deuteronomy 13:1. I can find that real quick. Everything I am commanding you, you are to take care to do. Do not add to or subtract from it. Now, there's an interesting thing that happened in Christianity, as far as I'm concerned. There's a verse in Acts, in fact, it's Acts 17:30, and it says, Paul is talking, and he says, in those olden days, God winked at it. Well, I'm concerned that Christians still believe God is winking at sin. He never winked at Israel. Deuteronomy 13:7. If your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or your wife whom you love, or your friend who means as much to you as yourself, secretly tries to entice you to go and serve other gods, which you haven't known, neither you nor your ancestors, gods of the people surrounding you, whether near or far away from you, anywhere in the world, you are not to consent, and you are not to listen to him, and you must not pity him or spare him, and you may not conceal him, rather you must kill him. That don't look like a wink to me. Huh? Oh, just forget about it. That was what Yah told Israel. Do you think he meant it? I can't give you an illustration where it actually happened, but possibly it did. But that was the extent of it. If somebody, anytime, anywhere, I don't care who it is, entices you to turn to another god or accept an idol, and you're not to hide it. I know that what that one was for. That was for the wife you love. That was for the child you love. You would try and conceal it. He said, don't conceal it. You must not hide them. You must kill them. I mean, that's serious business. And we have lost, because of teaching, we've lost how much God hates sin. But he truly hates it. He doesn't just tolerate it. He doesn't wink at it. He doesn't say, okay, I'll overlook it this time. You get a mulligan. I'm just going to let it go. He doesn't do that. Every sin has a consequence. Even when you gain forgiveness, the sin has a consequence. And all right, I like that you said yes. So I know you're with me. It does. Every sin has a consequence. And it's going to pay, it's going to receive payment one way or the other. What confuses us is it doesn't happen immediately. And sometimes you think you got away with it. But then you can wonder, why do things turn out the way they do? Why did this happen? Why does that happen? Okay. It's just coming around, catching up. Because sin has consequences. Okay. 13:13. If you hear it told that in one of your cities, which Adonai your God is giving you to live in, certain scoundrels have sprung up among you and have drawn away the inhabitants of their city by saying, let's go and serve other gods, which you haven't known. Then you are to investigate the matter, inquiring and searching diligently. If the rumor is true, if it is confirmed that such detestable things are being done among you, you must put the inhabitants of that city to death with the sword, destroying it completely with the sword, everything in it, including its livestock. Heap all its spoils in an open space, burn the city with its spoils to the ground for Jehovah your God. It will remain a tell forever and not be built again. None of what has been set apart for destruction is to stay in your hands. Did you ever wonder what the difference between Jericho and Ai was? Because when Yah led them into Jericho, he told them, utterly destroy it, don't take anything. Pile it all up and burn it. Remember? And Achan decided to keep a little Babylonian rug and a little silver and, what, nobody will miss it. But this is where Yah had commanded, because they obviously had scoundrels in it who were dealing in idolatry, and Yah wanted it completely destroyed, everything in it. And because of what Achan did, Pastor Jeff just taught on this recently. When they went to Ai, they lost. And Ai was just a little city, and they lost because sin was in the camp. You know the story. Well, when they went to Ai, they were allowed to take the spoil. You ever wonder why? Here's why. Because the one city had obviously tried to entice them into idolatry, and Yah will allow nothing in that to survive, nothing whatsoever. But in Ai, it was just a matter of overtaking it, and they were allowed to take the spoils. Now, all through this section, and in fact, all through Deuteronomy, you'll find the word remember. And it goes, remember when you were in Egypt, remember when I brought you out, remember all these different things. Now, Yah wants you to remember. This is another way to increase your faith and to help you, is to remember all the times that Yah has blessed you. I can remember our wedding day and the very words that Pastor Jeff said over us, and I'm encouraged every time I do that. I think about it a lot, probably every day, probably, and that's good. That helps me whenever, if I'm facing a difficult situation, I think about that, and I think, Yah's for me. He's for me. Nobody could have done what he did for me at that time, and then think he's not going to help me now. Of course he is, and I don't, and it moves me even. Then there's a section that is so sweet. I'm going to close on this one. This is in chapter 15, starting in verse 12. Again, the reason I wanted you to know that this is to Israel. It starts out, verse 12, chapter 15, Deuteronomy. If your kinsman, see, it's always your group. It's always the people. It should be us. You know, we should definitely be treating each other differently than we deal with the people in the world. Amen? Our best friend should be here, not a non-believer. How did that happen? But I know it happens all the time. If you're a Hebrew man or woman is sold to you. Now, why would they do such a thing? The same reason today. Now, back then, if you were in great debt and you couldn't pay the person you owed, you could sell yourself. You say, and what we would do today is say, well, look, I'll work for you for free for 6 years. And probably people would take you up on that. But back there, it was a common practice. But it was always a Hebrew brother or sister, okay? Now, there was provision for foreign slaves. That's another sermon, some other day. But if your kinsman, a Hebrew man or woman, is sold to you, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year you ought to set him free. And moreover, when you set him free, don't let him leave empty-handed, but supply him generously from your flock, threshing floor, and winepress. From what Yahweh your God has blessed you with, you are to give to him. Now that's not how you understand slavery. They bless them when they leave. Now here's the sweetest thing. Remember that you were a slave. There's that word. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Yahweh your God redeemed you. That is why I am giving you this order today. Now, but if he says to you, I don't want to go. I don't want to leave you. Because if he came in, there's other rules and regulations right here. If he came in as a single man, and the owner gave him a wife and he had children, the law was when he left, he had to leave by himself. The wife and children stayed. So the provision was, in Exodus, it spells it out completely. If he says, I love my master, I love my wife, I love my children, I will not go. And he Then they had to put him up against the door and take an awl and stick it in his ear. I don't know what that pierced in the ear was, but it marked him as a bond slave. Does that sound familiar? It should, because Paul called himself a bond slave of Yeshua the Messiah. Yaakov called himself a bond slave of Yeshua the Messiah. And Peter called himself a bond slave. In other words, you volunteered to be this slave. You loved the master, and you volunteered to be the slave. Isn't that awesome? You heard the song, I love my master, I will not go out free. Children, come on up. I'm going to close by, and it involves the children. And please, grown-ups, come and let's hold that. Somebody do that for me. Thank you. I love my master. I will not go out free. Abba, Father, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, I love you, O Master. I love my wife. I love my children. I will not go out free. O Yahuwah, my Elohim, today, once again, I just want to say that I give myself to you. I freshly reconsecrate to you. O Master, I love you. I love you because of who you are, because of the love which you daily bestow upon me, because of your great mercy, compassion, and grace. I love you because you are everything to me. And dear Abba, I love my wife. I love the Kahila. Thank you for such a provision granted to me. Mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters, my real family, my real home. And oh Abba, I love my children. Thank you, Abba, for all the dear young saints. Thank you for these young ones whose hearts are so tender toward you, whose ears are inclined to hear your voice and your speaking. Thank you for these ones separated from their brothers, these ones whom you have set apart, chosen, and called to be a generation to bring you back. For these young ones, O Master, I choose to never go out free. O Yahuwah, dear Father, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, for your sake, for the sake of the Kehillah, for the sake of these precious young ones, make me a person whose life is filled with purpose. Make me a person of life and train me to be useful to the Master. Father, I agree that I am yours. I agree that you would possess me fully. I agree that your perfect will would be done. I love you, O my Master. I would not half my service. His only it must be. His only who so loved me and gave himself for me, rejoicing and adoring. Henceforth my song shall be, I love my Master. I will not go out free. Amen. Amen. Where's Ben? That'll be fine. But okay. Can you do it? Yahweh, he who exists, kneel before you, presenting gifts, and guard you with a hedge of protection. Yahweh, he who exists, will eliminate the wholeness of his being toward you, bringing order, and he will provide you with love, sustenance, and friendship. Yahweh, he who will lift up wholeness of being and look upon you, and he will set in place all you need to be whole and complete. May Yahweh grant all the desires of our hearts, fulfill all our purposes and all our petitions. May Jehovah hear from heaven, quickly answer all our requests, and save us in the day of adversity. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, defend us from our enemies, from poverty and from bondage. Shabbat Shalom. See you in the fellowship hall for Enoch. Thank you.